So welcome to phase 2 of Pen to Profit. Right now, things are about to get serious. That's why I even put on a shirt here, because everything is gonna get very serious from now on. Here's where things get real. Here's where you're really gonna learn how to master the art of copywriting fast, the fastest way possible. So as I mentioned on phase 1, if you really want to master the art of copywriting, it is not about trying to become a very clever wordsmither. It's not about trying to become a very good writer in and of itself. It's all about understanding the customer's problems and getting to understand that problem so deeply and so thoroughly that you get to a point where you understand your audience so well that you can just pinpoint their problems, tell them exactly what's causing those problems to a level they never thought of before. And when you achieve that, they look at you as the only viable solution to those problems, because so far in their entire lives, you have been the only guy who have managed, or girl, who have managed to really understand their problem. And when they realize that, it's when you create a visceral desire for your product. So my objective here on this phase is to get you to understand the problem so deeply that you get to that point where writing just becomes natural for you. And that's what we're gonna do now. So let's get started. So this module specifically is about the principles of copywriting, and I want to cover here exactly the different types of problems we have, or more specifically 2 types of problems. There are problems that people have that they are aware of, and there are problems that people have they are not aware of. And when you can pinpoint those problems that they are not aware of and make them aware of it, that's when you create what I call visceral desire. Visceral desire is when they want your product so bad, when you want your solution so bad that on their minds they create their own stories as why they should buy your product instead of them buying any other product out there. So it's all about looking at all these problems and figuring out, okay, they are aware of this. They are aware of this other problem as well, and they are aware of this other problem. But majority of the times, for whatever the problem is, for whatever your target customer is, they have multiple pain points, and those pain points are not actually the real problem. They are symptoms of an underlying problem. When you can say that to them and open their eyes to that reality, that those are not the real problems, they are symptoms of a deeper problem, and show them what the real deep problem is that causes all the symptoms that they are seeing in their lives, that's when you create a visceral desire. That's when you create awareness about the problem. So everything we're doing in copywriting is surrounded about the problem. As I said before, it's all about leading with the problem. And as a general rule, the better you are at digging at the problem, really figuring out and pinpointing what's the problem and how they are feeling about it, the better your conversion rate is gonna be on your copy. Meaning, the better you are at pinpointing those problems, and not only pinpointing them, but also digging a little bit deep and getting your customer to feel the pain of those problems, the better you are at doing that, the better you're gonna sell. So this is an interesting scenario, because in order for you to solve your customers' problems, you first need to get them to really feel the pain of the problem. And the deeper they feel this pain, the more likely they are to look for a solution and to get your solution that's gonna fix their problem in the first place. So our job as a copywriter here, I always say that you need to stab people with their problem, but only stabbing them when the problem is not enough. You have to twist the knife. That's what we do with our copy. And then once you twist the knife and once they really feel that pain, that's when you get to present a solution to them. And I'm gonna show you exactly how to do that. And you have probably heard before that in order for you to be effective with your copy or any sales environment, marketing environment, you need to be able to communicate on an emotional level. If you really think about it, the exercises we did before, they were a very shallow level of communication, and I'm gonna show you exactly why and how we can fix that. And as I said before, you first want to elicit emotion, then have a logical argument as to why people should buy from you, because then you're first communicating emotionally and then giving people a logical reason to take that decision. And as you know, people first take decisions emotionally and then they justify their decisions with logic to themselves, not even to the people around them. That can happen, but majority of the times they justify the decision to themselves first, and they do that logically, not emotionally. The emotion comes first, you first elicit emotion, but the logic part of the argument must be there. So that's why it's very important to lead with a problem and then lead to your argument after people felt the pain of the problem in the first place. So this phase is all gonna be about uncovering your prospect's problems. And you are gonna see that problems, they just don't go one level. They have multiple layers to them and they go multiple levels deep. And you need to understand that in order to be able to communicate emotionally. Because if you want to communicate emotionally, you need to use those deeper layers. And the reason majority of the people, majority of the copy out there doesn't manage to elicit an emotional response on people, it's because they are communicating at this first level, this very shallow level when it comes to problems and solutions. And that's what we're going to learn how to do here. Now, before we do that, I'm just going over a few principles here. The first one is the problem, creating awareness about the problem. And really, all we are doing with the copy here is just taking people from whatever they are and creating awareness about their problem to a point where they cannot live with that problem anymore because now they are aware of that problem. And every single time they experience a pain that reminds them of that problem, they're going to remember of you because you were the one that made them aware of that problem in the first place. And when that happens, they see you as the only viable solution and see you as the only person who really understands them, who really gets them, who really gets their problem. And as a result, you obviously are the only viable solution to fix that problem for them because you are the only one who really understands their problem in the first place. Cool? And then the second concept I want you to get here before we dive into uncovering the real problems is I don't see myself as a writer. Exactly as I said on phase one, I don't consider myself a writer. A writer for me is someone who writes stories. They have to think about character building. They have to think about word building. They have to think about character acts. They have to think about cliffhangers and all those little details that we don't need to think about. I think myself more like a prosecutor trying to prove a case to a jury. As in, for every single sale you're gonna make, you need to go through a bunch of hoops and a bunch of steps in order for people to believe what they need to believe in order to get the sale. So whenever I want to sell something, I ask myself, what do people need to believe before I present them my product in order for them to accept the need for the sale? In order for them to accept the fact that the only possible solution for their problem is my product? What do they need to believe before I make the sale in order for that to happen? And I say that I see myself as a prosecutor trying to prove a case to a jury in that situation because it's the very same scenario you're gonna face if you are a prosecutor trying to prove a case to a jury. So let's, for example, say that there was a case of a homicide, and then you're trying as a prosecutor to prove that this specific guy was the guy that committed the homicide there. What does the jury, what does the judge, what do they need to believe in order for them to accept that that guy was the one shooting that person in the first place? Well, probably they need to believe that he was the one that fired a shot, right? Now, before they believe he was the one that fired a shot, they probably need to believe that he was the one holding the gun, right? In order for them to believe that he was holding the gun, they probably need to believe that he was there in that specific place. Let's say it was a room. He was there in that specific room at the moment the homicide happened. So in order for them to believe that he was there in that room in the moment that homicide happened, they probably need to believe that he wasn't somewhere else. And from there, you always have a step before to see what do they need to believe before they can believe in this thing. So it becomes a chain of beliefs, and I'm gonna go over that on the next module specifically, but I just want you to understand that when I approach copy, I don't approach it as a writer. I don't approach it like in terms of characters, in terms of word building. I approach it more like a prosecutor trying to prove a case and trying to figure out what are the beliefs, what are the chain of beliefs that I need to guide people through in order for them to accept the sale. I know this is still a very abstract concept, but as we go through the modules here, it will all make sense. And I want you to have this little bit of understanding before I get into it because it's gonna be very important as we go through the exercises. So those were the very two first principles I want you to think about copywriting. And now we are gonna start talking about the problems and how to really figure out what your audience's problems are and what are the multiple levels of problems they have. Cool? So let's get into it.